broadcasting today. It reminds me of the old days when I used to do talk radio many years ago, and kind of thing I'm getting back into now, actually. And I'm joined by an old pro, actually, in talk radio, that being Bill Tatro, who is an economist, and we do need to talk to an economist right now. Bill, thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here, Charles. Love the technology.
You know, it's amazing what you can do now. I mean, anyone can be a media mogul.
Remember the days you had to sit in the studio and they had to cue you and
Oh, yeah.
all that?
And when the train left the station, if you weren't on it, forget it. You had to be
That's
there.
right.
Bill, so you're an economist. You've written so many interesting articles about the American economy in particular and the coronavirus. And now we have, of course, the new wrinkle of these various, communist activists looting and burning minority cities, neighborhoods. And that has to be factored into the consideration. But in the overall, do you think that, how do you think the recovery is going to take place now that the virus is receding and that we're moving in the direction of getting back to normal, hopefully soon?
Well, there's going to be a recovery, but the problem is that the dynamics have totally changed now. And what I mean by that, imagine if you are a restaurant owner. We'll just take that particular business because that seems to be in the forefront of conversation a lot now. But you're a restaurant owner and you have a model. You know, the world today is run on the Keynesian philosophy. There's two types of economists out there. There's Keynesians and there's Austrians. I'm an Austrian. I'll give you a quick sidebar. I went to George Washington University. My professor was John Kenneth Galbraith.
Okay. Who was a major Keynesian.
Absolutely. And he used to say to me, and my name is Tatro, it's pronounced Tatro, but he used to say, Mr. Tatro, you will never understand this because you are an Austrian. And I go, no, doctor, I was born in upstate New York. He goes, no. And he says, but Keynesian is the Keynesian world. Well, we went away from it for a while, but now we're back to it. And all Keynesians put things on models. The Keynesian philosophy says that if it doesn't work, it's not because the thing is wrong, the philosophy is wrong. It's because you haven't done enough of it. You haven't printed enough money. You haven't gone into deep enough debt. You got to do more and more and more. So when you look at a business, when a restaurant is going to reopen, they have been around, let's say a restaurant's been around for 10, 15 years, successful. They know how many people are going to come in on a Tuesday night or a Saturday night. They shop accordingly. They buy their foodstuffs. They know how to staff. They know everything. That's their model. Now when they come back, it's all changed because you take any city, they're talking about social distancing. Will you have 200 people on a Saturday night that you're planning on, or will you only have 75? How do you staff it? Will your employees come back? So we're into a whole new dynamic. It's kind of like, I've been saying this on shows I've been on and I've been writing and talking. It's kind of like a sea change. When we went from an agrarian society to a manufacturing society, everything had to change. When we went from that manufacturing to, we'll say, information, it all changed. Now we're into a totally different dynamic. And economically, there will be many failures, but there will be some successes because some people will figure it out. But it's going to be a whole different world, Charles, a totally different world.
You know, in a way, it seems like we're going back to the agrarian model in this country, in that you have people who are operating like I'm operating right now, in the home with a computer running a business. You've got a kind of a smaller manufacturing, smaller services. It's in a way it's a move toward localism, that people aren't. There's not going to be this massive travel, and that that may not be a bad thing. I mean, there's both pluses and minuses to it, but in a sense, people are trying to protect their local community and their local life more. And I hope that going forward, that's going to be the approach to dealing with the virus now that we've had this national lockdown. Maybe in the future, we can have a means by which if there's an outbreak of this disease or any other disease, we can handle it locally and make sure it doesn't spread and let everyone else continue to function normally. I want to,
You
yeah.
you have three. You just said a whole mouthful there. I mean, you got like 15 shows in what you just said. Quite honestly, because when you look at it, yes, there will be positives that come out of this. There always are. Imagine the farm boy who thought he was going to live on the farm and work on the farm and marry and have children on the farm for the rest of his life. And all of a sudden, somebody said, no, farm life is over. You got to go to the city and work in the plant. That's going to be terrible. That's going to be the worst thing in the world. I can't do that. But then he goes and he finds the benefits of working in the plant. So each time that we've had these sea changes, whether they've been, and one has to wonder, is this a man-made total situation? I mean, there's so much to, you look at this thing. Is this an accident of nature? Is this God putting his finger on the world? I understand from people, friends of mine who are around the world in different places, the oceans have never been cleaner. The water has never been purer. So, you get things that are going to come positive out of it, but it's that transition, Charles. It's getting from here to there. And that's where the difficulty is. I look at what's going on in the cities right now. And, you characterize the people there. I guess we could do that. But I just, I can't get my hands around that. I can't grasp what it is people are looting for or burning for. I'm a child of the 60s. I was at George Washington University in 1964. You got to remember, in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was put forth by Lyndon Johnson. The country was in turmoil. I was arrested protesting in front of the White House, but we protested for something specific. We were protesting the Vietnamese War at that time.
Right, there was something actually real going on. No question.
That's right. So, I mean, it's like I can't get my arms. But so, as I said, from this one point, from where we are to when we move out to the other side, Donald Trump had said it was going to be, by Easter? Yeah, all over by. But you see, the one thing that Trump didn't say is what year Easter. Right. So I think he kind of left it open there. But that's
nobody could predict that, yeah.
Yeah, getting from one side to the other. That's going to be the difficulty.
Now, I want to ask you, because you mentioned that you're an Austrian versus a Keynesian. I saw the interview recently with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell on 60 Minutes, and he clearly is a Keynesian. I mean, he was saying that the problem right now is that Congress and the government is not spending enough. He said we have to put more money in, and that the interviewer said to him a very honest, blatant question. I was shocked to hear a Federal Reserve Chairman mention this. But he said, how do you create the money? Do you just print it? And he said, yeah, we do. That's basically what, or we move a couple of computer, the mouses around and click. And the argument that he made was basically that in a time like this, when there is a major contraction in production, and a major, removal of employment and all of the things that accompany that contraction, you have to spend more to keep everybody afloat and to make sure that things continue to function. It's not a time to cut back, and that once things are back to somewhat semblance of a normalcy, that's when you do the cutting back, and that it's this kind of like a wave. I mean, you pump money in when there's a downside. You pull the money back out when there's an upside. And I think that's basically the summation of the Keynesian idea, isn't it?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And as an Austrian, and who am I to question Jerome Powell? But that would be like saying, let's see, Jerome Powell is simply echoing the prior Federal Reserve chiefs going back to Greenspan. Sure. They've all had the same exact policy. If you go back and think when Greenspan cut interest rates after 2000, then when Bernanke in 2008 kept the interest rates down, we started quantitative easing, which, by the way, is nothing new. I mean, that's been around forever and ever, but primarily started by the Japanese. You see where they are 3 decades later, no growth, stagnant, okay? But Jerome Powell is simply echoing the Keynesian philosophy, which is, again, just print, print, print. And if it's wrong, well, print more. And so when he said, the Federal Reserve has a checkbook, You and I would get arrested for writing checks with no money. We go to jail. That's fraud. That's a crime. But the Federal Reserve is able to print and create money out of thin air. Now, when you take a look at it, and if I don't want to bore your listeners with the dryness of economics, but the real simplicity is that what you get is the money that was being printed in '08 never got into the system. Okay, you get different people out there that are saying, okay, inflation, inflation, inflation. There's so much money out there that we're going to have inflation. Now remember, inflation is not rising prices. Contrary to what people think, it is not rising prices. It is too much money chasing too few goods. That's inflation. The result is rising prices. That is the thing that happens. Prices go up. So why didn't they go up in 2008? Because the money that was being printed by the Federal Reserve did not get to you and me. It did not get to the people. It got short-stopped at the banks. And what the banks did then was able to take it, lend it to the corporations who did not put it into their business. They didn't put it into people. They didn't put it into bricks and mortar or put it into new technology or research and development. They simply used it to buy back stock. Okay.
Well, but by doing that, wasn't that a way to, sort of an end run, get the money back into the economy? Because obviously if they're buying back their investors, then the money goes into their pocket and they either consume it or they invest it.
Well, that's true, Charles, if you have that misguided belief, and I don't mean to insult my host, but if you have the misguided belief that the majority of stock in this country is owned on an equal basis by the average guy in the street.
Oh, no, I don't have any illusions about that. I'm even saying the super rich. Yeah, I mean, right. So but they have to do something with the money. They're not going to stick it into a shoebox. I mean, they're going to either invest it or they're going to spend it, and they're going to build stuff or they're going to do stuff with it.
You see, that is the Keynesian argument, that the rich guy is going to do stuff. Okay, Charles. Warren Buffett walks into the local sandwich shop, okay? Mm-hmm. And he walks in and the 10 people who normally go in there don't have any money, so they can't go in there and buy the sandwiches. But Warren Buffett walks in and he buys the one sandwich. The rich man buys the sandwich. How many sandwiches can Warren buy? If he's buying it for the total community, that's one thing, but he's not. He buys one sandwich. This was the problem back in 1929. Nobody had any money. But when you take a look in 29 and 30, 31, 32, 33, but when you look, the rich people went through the Depression very easily, very well. They did very well. We're in the same environment right now. In fact, right now, we are worse. Why are we worse than we were in '08? Because all of a sudden, not only do the people out there not have any money, they don't have any jobs. Now, all of a sudden, unemployment rate runs to 25%, 20%, whatever number you want to throw at it. But I would argue, and it's always good to have that, back and forth with the host and the guest. I would take the position that the idea of trying to get the money into the system somehow has gotten once again backstopped. Who made a lot of money in the first? Let's get the money into the system with the payroll and stuff like that. I know the big banks, they were set up. Did any of the government's money go through local banks? No. It went through the big majors. They got their piece of the action first. How many people out there have actually been getting checks? I don't know. Now they're starting. I haven't got mine. Where's my
actually, I think a lot of people are. I haven't gotten one either, but I think a lot of people are getting them, and people are getting. Now that brings me to the question of unemployment. I mean, you've got 14 million people who are temporarily unemployed. Doesn't the government? I mean, this is again the argument made by by Powell and by the Keynesians, that you have to give them enough to get through, to pay for their way, because first of all, I mean, and this is on your side, we have a debt-oriented economy, so people don't have the resources. If there's one thing we've learned from this, is that people don't have enough reserve to last 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, everyone's going by the paycheck. So, we can take a look at a very overall look at how this economy functions, and it should be a savings-based rather than a debt-based economy. But given the fact that we are debt-based, don't you have to have that extra unemployment and that extra catastrophe amount added to it? I mean, that's what would the Austrians do in a time like this?
I would say the answer to that is no.
Okay.
Now, let's go back to what you said. What you said earlier was that, is it possible good things will come out of this? And my point is, yes, I think good things will come out of this. We have been a society for many years, okay? I'm a historian also, so I have to go back.
Right.
You go back to 1919 and 1920. 1919 was the worst year for this country, one of the worst years. We had just come out of the war. The war had ended. Men came back from the war. There were no jobs. It was absolutely terrible, and there was no money. So you had a great depression at that point in time. And so what guys like Henry Ford discovered was that the mass were consumers. Remember, automobiles were built for the rich guy. What he decided was to build automobiles for the poor people, so to speak, okay? But then they decided to, wait a minute, if we're gonna build a vacuum cleaner, an automobile, buy a house, people don't have the money. What do? That's when credit first started. In 1920, we started credit. And when credit, people found that they could go to the store, they could buy this. They didn't have credit cards, but they had credit, layaway plans, etc. Out of that came the Roaring '20s. Okay, we became a country that lived on debt. For the next 100 years, we have made it not just a science, but an art of living on debt. We have gotten to the point where everybody's got to have this. We've got to have instant delivery, thus Amazon. We've got to have, we got to be able to go on that multi-$1,000 vacation. We've got to put the new wing on the house. We got to have it, and we can do it. But now all of a sudden, we can't. Do we sit back and we say to the government has a choice. The government says, well, I will give you the money to maintain your lifestyle. The Austrian says, no, you figure out a different lifestyle. You figure out, remember, Charles, I was on Wall Street for 40 years, okay? I used to tell people at the end of my career, before I retired, I've been in radio and television for a long time, author, etc. But I used to tell people at the end of my career, financial planning is bogus. It's bogus. And people say, you manage hundreds of millions of dollars. You have thousands of clients. How could you say it's bogus? Because the world can change like that. Your money can go like that. We could have a devaluation of the currency. Inflation could go up. Your $100,000 could maybe buy you a loaf of bread. It can change like that. So when you get ready to retire, yes, save, put money away, do the things, but understand this. What you have when you get ready to leave or retire, that's what you have. Live based upon that. So today, I mean, look, you're not in a studio. You've learned how to do something different. We all learn how to do something different. I wrote a book several years ago, 1 Hour Survival Guide for the Downsized. It was in 2000, 20 years ago. It's just as, we're going to put it out again. It's just as important today. I used to say to people, don't cut everything off you do, but figure out a different way to do it. Okay, so you got Netflix. So you don't spend $30 at the movie theater. You spend $5 or $10 a month on Netflix. You take a walk hand in hand with your wife or girlfriend. You look at the sunset. You do things that don't cost you money. We learn how to get back to it. See, if you don't have the new car, you're not the good guy. And so what we do in the government, we feed into that. We have to have, Charles, remember, one man's wants may be another man's needs, or vice versa.
Well, first of all, I mean, I think that you obviously have to have some credit in an economy because you can't you can't buy a house with cash. You can't buy a car with cash. You know, there are big items that we do need or we can justify that are just going to be expensive. I mean, I think that I would agree that if we have more of a transition toward a savings-based economy as opposed to a debt-based economy, then that's a good thing. But you know, in a time like this, given the fact that we do have a debt-based economy, we can't just do that overnight. You can't just wave a wand. It has to be a transition, and I think the transition is ultimately and this might sound very controversial, but I believe that the federal government and the Treasury Department and the Congress need to buy back the debt from the Federal Reserve over time and phase it out, and then issue currency directly based upon what the economy requires, interest-free. That this would result in a situation by which, the money will be worth what it's worth. It won't be a debt instrument, and that and to mirror that, people and states and governments, and they would also operate on the actual cash that they have, that they've created. It wouldn't be a balloon.
So you want to monetize the debt? I mean, that's monetization of the debt.
Yes.
Which is what we're doing right now.
And it's probably a positive development here. I think it has to be done slowly and carefully, because you have to make sure that people who have, securities, who are retired, and people who, that everybody's, the bonds are stable and that everything goes properly. There may have to be some haircuts involved, maybe. But I think if it's done carefully and over time, then we could move to a savings-based economy and a more localized economy, and not this one that we have to then balloon up the debt every time there's a crisis. But right now, today, we have to do that because of the economy. We can't just, it's just the facts on the ground, so to speak.
Okay, so let me throw this at you. Okay, so now I'm gonna play host and you be guest. Okay, I'll throw this out at you.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm an employee at the local restaurant, and I could go back to work for $7 an hour, $8 or $10, and get my tips based upon 200 people a night, but there might only be 75 people a night, and so therefore my tips aren't going to be good. Or I can sit home drawing my unemployment and get my extra 600 a week or whatever it is, and make more money by sitting home than going to work. Okay, they're going to close that off on July 31st unless we all argue, and I would make this case that they will extend that. The politicians, it's a political year, they're going to extend that. So now all of a sudden we've now taken one major step closer to socialism. I mean, we are a socialist country anyway, in many different aspects, but we've now taken that one step. But here's the thing that I would throw out, okay? And I understand where you're coming from. I understand that. It's a solution, but now you're going to have to repeal the laws of economics to be able to do that. And what I mean by that is, if all of a sudden, if they're monetizing the debt, and every time we get into trouble, why send me $1,200? Why not send me $5,000? Make it more comfortable for me. And some politician will say, didn't we hear Bernie Sanders say, you shouldn't get $1,200, you should get $2,000 or $3,000 or whatever it is, right? Okay, so now the guy who is, what comes to mind, Charles, is the picture in 1927, 1928 of the guys with the wheelbarrows in Germany with money in the wheelbarrow being paid at noontime. Nobody ever asked, I have students and people like I teach them like that, say, well, why did they pay them at noontime? Very simple, because if they didn't pay them at noon, they would have to wait to buy the bread in the afternoon, and it was much more expensive in the afternoon because it kept going up and up and up and up. They got paid at noontime. With that cash, they were able to buy the bread. That's what you'll have. You monetize that debt. And Powell knows that. Okay. Ultimately, eventually, okay, we will, as we move to the other side, you monetize the debt, money's going to be worth basically nothing. I mean, since the Federal Reserve started in 1913, the dollar is 97% in purchasing power less than it was then. And that was with normal inflation, et cetera. Given how they monetized the debt the last 6 months, year, 3 years since Obama, I mean, I don't know, what's it going to be worth 5 years from now? 10 cents? Who knows? That's the danger that you run into. Major danger.
Well, the only thing that might counteract that is if production increases, if you have more of a need for money, because you've got more people, doing A, B, and C, and you need, money for transactions, and you've got more people saving, and in other words, if there's an overall increase in product in national production, then that would absorb the extra money.
Okay, so you're going with supply and demand. You're saying a greater supply will meet the demand, And so if we have more supply, obviously, and as Galbraith used to tell me, supply and demand dictates everything. I mean, everything is driven by supply and demand. It's
Right.
possible.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that, but it's possible.
Well, that plus the ultimate constriction of excess monies by retiring the debt through the as I said, the Treasury actually creating money and buying back the bonds slowly, so it doesn't result in inflation. I mean, these things have to be done over decades, but we're talking maybe a little bit more philosophically here, that we want to learn lessons from this particular crisis and move the country toward a savings-based economy. I don't even think you and I disagree that much on that.
No, let's go back for something, okay? The expansion of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet was so dramatic that, at last year, at the end of 2019, the Federal Reserve Powell put forward the beginning of the reduction of the balance sheet.
Right.
That freaked out Wall Street so badly that we had a major plummet, and all of a sudden Powell and the rest of the Federal Reserve officials go on TV and go, "Oh, no, we're done. That's it. No more. In fact, we're going to reinstitute quantitative easing." As a matter of fact, and this is before the coronavirus hit, right?
Right, sure.
And we're going to kind of a status quo. So the question becomes, what is driving all of this? Is it Wall Street that ultimately is the raison d'etre for the Federal Reserve? Okay. I mean, everybody recognizes that if you don't reduce the balance sheet, the inflation aspect will be there. But is that a bad thing for Wall Street? Is it a bad thing for the market? Is it a bad thing for that 1%? Now we get back to circle all the way around. What's really happening here? What is, I'm an author. I like novels. Okay. I've written novels. I like all this stuff. And so I look at this as the great conspiracy theory. Who's driving all this? Is this just happening by accident, or are we really having something done? Okay. Charles, I want to show you one thing. Okay. I don't know if you can see this. Can you see that?
Yes, I can. 44th
Okay.
presidential what? I don't see the whole thing.
The presidential conspiracy.
Okay. Is this
Okay,
a book?
now,
Did you write this?
it's by me. Okay.
Okay.
I wrote that book in 2016. What's ironic about this, and I've had people, it's all pretty well, okay? And what's ironic is I've had people calling me up and sending me emails and say, everything in your book is coming true. Coming true.
Right.
And I said, what do you mean coming true? I said, I know it's coming true, but now with the riots, that in your book, your president wants to not have an election. So what happens? There's a creation of riots in city after city after city, and ultimately martial law is called. And since there's martial law, there's no election. Now, I know this is terrible that I just did that. Self-promotion.
All right. Well, why not hold it up? It's a real concern. I mean.
So that's the book. Okay. If people want to read what's going to happen, it's a very quick read. Okay. It's a very fast read. And I think you can get it for 99 cents on Amazon. So anyway, but that's my self-promotion. But
no. I mean, it's a very troubling thought, and I don't think it's going to happen like that. I think that if we had a liberal in the White House right now, like a Hillary Clinton or one of those sort of establishment types, we probably already would have martial law because of the coronavirus. We would have had concentration camps. I don't mean that in the Nazi sense, but I mean they would have been sending people away who would dare to step out on their lawn too long. They weren't sheltered, or we would have had entire industries nationalized, which is what Mayor of New York Bill de Blasio called for. But because we had Trump, who was more conservative and who believes in more of a limited government, that didn't happen. He basically worked with the states. He worked within the constitutional system. He helped as a last resort, as a stopgap, and but he allowed the states each to develop their own policies based upon their own individual level of crisis. And of course, we've seen what's happened with that. You've seen some of the more authoritarian blue states, so-called, the left-wing states, become drunk with the power that was involved there. But it didn't happen on a federal level, and I don't think it's going to happen now. I think there are forces in the country that would like that to happen. It probably would have already happened, but I don't think Trump is going to go that way. I think he's going to continue to operate carefully and within the constitutional curve.
I would hope so. Remember, that was a novel, okay, and it was written when Barack Obama was president.
Right.
I was asked on my radio show at the time. I'm on 1510 in Phoenix, okay, and prior to that, well, that's a long time. My history goes back. I'm old, Charles. So, but I was asked the question, where did Obama come from? And I couldn't figure it out. So I wrote this book about him. And so people say, well, then you're anti-Obama and you're pro-Trump. I said, no, I am not anti or pro either one. I take every president going all the way back. I look at their each individual situation. There are things that I disagree with President Trump. There's things I agree. There's things I disagree. Now, sometimes more with different ones like Obama or Clinton and like that. Maybe there are things I did agree on. Someone once said, well, what do you think about Lincoln and Washington? I said, the jury's still out on those guys. I make decisions slowly on these characters. But the bottom line is situations will dictate, okay? And he will, the one thing I discovered about Donald Trump, he's not afraid to react. Sometimes he might overreact, but he is not afraid to react and maybe do what the situation calls for, which I think is very, very important. But we are in a very interesting time period, and from the standpoint historically, people who say, "Well, I don't really like history," well, I think it was Churchill once said that those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. Actually, no, it was Santana that said that. It was the poet in Spain. Mm-hmm. But we take a look at we look at go back to World War II. You talk about collecting people, concentration camps. They were basically centers. Who did they pick up? All the Japanese, because they felt the Japanese, even though they might have been there for 30 years in the country, were a threat to this country. Let's swing it over. All right, you, Charles, take a conservative stance. I take a conservative stance. Maybe the powers to be think we are a threat to this country. Come pick us up. It has been done before. It's not unprecedented.
No, it's not.
It's simply a repeat of history. And so I would say that given the people who want to be in power, okay, especially like as an example, I look at Minnesota drives me crazy, Charles. Okay, I'm not talking about the Minnesota Vikings. I'm talking about a liberal state controlled by liberals, controlled by Democrats, hasn't voted for Republican. I don't even think they went for Reagan. I mean, forever, right? And yet, where did most of the violence in the city start? Where did it start? It started in Minneapolis, okay? And the state is like deteriorated. So to me, you look at that state, it's the death of liberalism, right? Right there. But with all due respect to this whole thing, could they win the next election and win everything? Anything is possible in this all of impossible world that we've got out there. Sure. It is crazy. So you don't know. I mean, it gives you a lot to talk about.
No, I mean, all we could do is put out the message as best we can and hope to reach people. But I do think, I mean, I don't know if this is what you're saying, but I do think that this is an example of the failure of the liberal left in these states. And you look at California also. I mean, it's a disaster. So is New York. But will that move the needle in terms of people thinking about their liberalism? I think it might. I think that we could see the Democratic Party, which has been completely captive by them, put out of business for the next 30 years. I mean, this is maybe from my mouth to God's ear, but I think that with these catastrophes, you could see it, and I think that they know it. Anyway, Bill, but this has been a really interesting talk. Let my listeners and viewers know where they can get your book and get information about you and your website or anything else you'd like to share.
Yes, thank you very much. You can go to Bill Tatro. It's spelled T as in Tom, A, T as in Tom, R-O, BillTatro.com. That goes to my website. You can try a 7-day free trial. My podcast, okay, and my website and I Talk is for subscription, okay? When I left radio and decided to go back in several years ago when I retired, and I said to my producer, I want to do something, but I want to get paid for it, okay? And I want to get paid. So we have subscribers all over the world. And we do our show 3-4 times a week. It's on everything. It's finance. It's on everything, okay? And so we do that. Then I do, and that is that. That's that particular thing. Then I do the daily, the podcast. I should say the podcast, which is I call it the Daily Dose. Daily Dose with Bill Tatro. It is about 5 to 6 minutes. That's it. Mm-hmm. I talk history. I talk finance. I talk everything. That's free. You can go on Bill Tatro or Daily Dose with Bill Tatro. That's every single day. If you've got 6 minutes, listen to it.
Good.
Because I teach you right now this week, we're talking about derivatives in the market, and I educate, I talk history, I talk finance, and it is all very informative, and I would listen to it myself if I wasn't doing it. So,
oh, good. No, I'll be checking it out, believe me.
Yeah, it's 5 to 6 minutes a day. That's it. They can follow me on Twitter on the Tatro Show, Tatro Show. But to get it all, just go to BillTatro.com. And that gives everything. This book, 44th, The Presidential Conspiracy, they can get, and they should get it. It's very, it's good. And I'll just show you one more, because we're going to put this out, not in book form. We're going to put this out strictly as an ebook, The 1-Hour Survival Guide for the Downsides, what you need to know when you're let go. I put it out 20 years ago. I've updated it. We're going to call it the Corona version and COVID-19 version. So that's coming out in about a month.
Good.
But I'm supposedly retired, but I'm working more than I did before.
There you go. No, very interesting. I hope to be in touch with you from time to time.
I would like to make this a frequent thing. I think I've enjoyed it. And I find us on the same wavelength, but then we got to be off a little bit. That makes for good radio.
Exactly. All right, Bill Tatro, listen, I want to thank you for joining me. Great talking with you. Have a great afternoon.
Charles, thank you very much. Have a great day.
All right, Bill. Take care.
Okay, buddy.
And I'll send you a link to YouTube once it's up.
Super. Good. I'll put it on. Thank you.
All right.